Okay, we're on the subject of, does sickness come from God? And in Luke 13, chapter 13, and verse 10, we have a little thing here that Jesus was handling. And it said, and he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. A lot of times he was criticized for preaching on the Sabbath. But verse 11, it said, and behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years. Now our question is, does this sickness come from God, right? She had a spirit of infirmity 18 years and was bound together and could in no wise lift up herself. Now, verse 12 says, and when Jesus saw her, he called her to him and said unto her, watch this, woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. Well, my question is, the woman has a spirit of infirmity here, and she's had it for 18 years, and of course she's been in the synagogue for all of these years, and nothing's ever happened. And Jesus shows up, and he sees her condition that she's all bent over, and he says to her, woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. And in verse 13 it said, and he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. Well, here, again, we're seeing that Jesus, we know Jesus is the Son of God, right? And so here we're seeing that she's had the spirit of infirmity for 18 years, and nothing's happened at church, apparently because in church they didn't teach the right things that healing belonged to her. And so when Jesus came along, he just simply saw her condition and said, woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. And it said, and he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. Now in verse 14 it said, and the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation, because that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day. So he's being critical that Jesus had healed on this certain day. Well, if we come to church on, Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or whatever day we come to church, that ought to be a day that we can be prayed for. It doesn't matter what day we come to church. We should be able to be prayed for on that day. And so here, he accused Jesus of healing on the Sabbath and said unto the people, there are 6 days in which men ought to work, and in them therefore come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. So he was saying, well, you can't be healed on the Sabbath day. Or people could say today, you can't be healed on Sunday. Well, no. As we go along here, we're going to see that that's not true. Okay, now in verse 15, it says, the Lord then answered him and said, thou hypocrite. He called this minister a hypocrite. He said, thou hypocrite, doth not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or his ass from the stall and lead him away to watering? Well, if we get out of our house and we get into our car, that would be considering working, because we're going to have to drive that car to church. Well, here they had donkeys, right? And so he was saying, the donkey needed to be watered and taken care of. What if we had to, before we went to church, we had to check the oil on the car, to make sure there's plenty of oil in the car, or check the water, or whatever. That would be working. Would that be allowed on the Sabbath day, or should we just say, well, no, we're not going to check it, and we can't go to church today because, we don't know if the car's going to work. And we don't want the car to get in trouble. No, that's ridiculous to think things like that. Jesus called him a hypocrite, And verse 16, Jesus said, and ought not this woman, watch it, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan had bound. Who bound her? Satan. Whom Satan had bound. Lo, these 18 years. So Satan had bound her for 18 years, And the ruler of the synagogue didn't have enough information inside of him to tell her that she could be healed, that it was part of her covenant rights to be healed. So he said, whom Satan had bound, lo, these 18 years. And then he said, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day. Well, he's telling the people that she was bound, and she was bound by Satan. And Jesus took authority over that situation and loosed her. Now, with us, Jesus would say to us that we are to lay hands on the sick and they shall recover. In Mark 16:18. Amen? And so, it would be the same thing with us. It doesn't matter what day. Okay? In verse 17 it said, and when he had said these things, all his adversaries were ashamed, and all the people rejoiced for all the glorious things that were done by him. Amen. So here we're seeing that the sickness or whatever came to this woman, being bound, was from Satan, and being set free was from Jesus or from the Son of God. Amen.